The whispers followed her like tumbleweeds across the dusty main street of Silverridge, Texas. Eleanor McCallister kept her chin high despite the snickering and pointed fingers aimed at her mismatched ensemble, a faded calico dress patched with scraps of old feed sacks, paired with men's boots 2 sizes too large. It was 1878, and in a frontier town where appearances meant everything to those who had something to prove, Eleanor had become the favorite target of the town's gossips. "Look at that patchwork disaster," whispered Mabel Johnson loudly enough for everyone to hear as Eleanor passed the general store. Dressed like she raided the ragpicker's cart, Eleanor's cheeks burned, but she continued walking with deliberate steps. At 22, she had endured far worse than petty mockery. 3 years ago, she had buried both parents within months of each other, leaving her the struggling family ranch and her younger brother to raise. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford when keeping food on the table meant sacrificing everything else, including fashionable clothing. She entered the mercantile, clutching her small list of necessities and the precious few coins wrapped in her handkerchief. The cool interior offered a momentary respite from both the Texas heat and the burning stares outside. "Miss McCallister," greeted Mr. Finch, the elderly shopkeeper. His kind eyes never lingered on her threadbare clothing. "What can I help you with today?" "Just the usual, Mr. Finch. Flour, coffee, and perhaps some lamp oil if I have enough." As Mr. Finch gathered her items, the bell above the door jingled, announcing new customers. Eleanor stiffened at the sound of familiar laughter. Victoria Wilkes and her friends, daughters of the wealthiest ranchers in the county. They swept in wearing their fine dresses with perfect ribbons and lace. "My goodness," Victoria said loudly. "I thought for a moment someone had brought in a scarecrow." Her friends tittered as Eleanor kept her eyes fixed on the counter. "Ladies," Mr. Finch said sharply, "I'll be with you once I've finished with Miss McCallister." Victoria smiled sweetly. "Take your time, we're in no hurry to stand near, whatever she's wearing." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she counted out her coins. One fell, rolling across the wooden floor toward the group of women. Before she could move, a weathered hand scooped it up. "I believe this belongs to you, miss." The deep voice belonged to a tall man Eleanor had never seen before. He stood straight as a fence post, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His clothes were trail-worn but well-kept, and the spurs on his boots jingled softly as he stepped forward, returning her coin. "Thank you," Eleanor murmured, quickly pocketing it. The stranger's gaze passed over Victoria and her friends before returning to Eleanor. "Madam," he said with a slight tip of his hat. Then to Mr. Finch, "I'm looking to stock up before heading to the Broken Spur. Garrett Gray, the new foreman." A hushed excitement rippled through Victoria's group. The Broken Spur was the largest ranch in the county, and a new foreman was noteworthy news, especially one as handsome as this Garrett Gray. "Of course, Mr. Gray, welcome to Silverridge," Mr. Finch responded enthusiastically. "I'll be right with you." Victoria stepped forward, suddenly all charm. "Mr. Gray, I'm Victoria Wilkes. My father owns the Diamond W. We'd be delighted to have you join us for dinner sometime to welcome you properly." Garrett nodded politely. "Much obliged for the invitation, Miss Wilkes." Victoria glanced smugly at Eleanor, who was gathering her meager purchases. "You must forgive some of our local sights. Not everyone in Silverridge understands the importance of proper appearance." Eleanor felt her shoulders tense as she prepared for another barb, but the new foreman surprised her. "Where I come from, Miss Wilkes," Garrett said calmly, "a person's worth isn't measured by the fabric they wear, but by the fabric of their character." Victoria's smile faltered as Garrett turned away from her to help Eleanor with her packages. "Allow me to carry these to your wagon, miss." "McCallister, Eleanor McCallister, but there's no need, I insist," he said, gathering her items. "My mother raised me to be a gentleman, regardless of whether I'm in the company of silk or calico." As they walked out together, Eleanor felt Victoria's glare burning into her back. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street. Eleanor led Garrett to her weathered wagon where her old mare, Penny, waited patiently. "The McCallister place," Garrett said as he loaded her purchases. "North of town about 5 miles," Eleanor nodded, surprised. "Yes, though it's hardly worth knowing about these days. On the contrary. Your father bred some of the finest quarter horses in the territory. I bought one from him years back. Best horse I ever owned." Pride warmed Eleanor's chest. "That was before the drought, before he passed." Garrett studied her face. "I heard about his passing, sorry for your loss." "You running the place now?" "Trying to," Eleanor admitted. "With my brother Tommy, he's 16. Garrett nodded thoughtfully. "Admirable, most would have sold up and moved on." "It's home," she said simply. A group of cowboys emerged from the saloon across the street, their loud voices carrying. One spotted Eleanor and nudged his companions. "There she is, boys, Silverridge's very own ragdoll," he called out. Garrett's expression darkened, but Eleanor touched his arm lightly. "Please don't, I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be," he replied quietly. The cowboys sauntered over, emboldened by whiskey and each other's company. "Hey there, Scarecrow," the leader called. "What's that dress made from anyway?" "Potato sacks." Eleanor climbed onto her wagon seat. "Good day, gentlemen," she said calmly, refusing to engage. "Aw, don't be like that," another said. "We're just curious how you decide what to wear each morning. Do you just close your eyes and grab whatever's least moth-eaten?" Garrett stepped between the wagon and the men. "That's enough." The cowboys sized him up, noticing the quiet confidence in his stance and the weathered gun belt at his hip. "Who are you supposed to be?" the leader challenged, though with less bravado. Garrett Gray, new foreman at the Broken Spur. He kept his voice level. "And I don't take kindly to men who mistake cruelty for humor." The mention of the Broken Spur changed their demeanor instantly. No one wanted trouble with the biggest ranch in the county. "Just having some fun, Gray," the leader mumbled, backing away. "No offense meant." "I believe the offense was clear," Garrett replied, "and I believe you owe the lady an apology." Reluctantly, the cowboy removed his hat. "Apologies, Miss McCallister." Eleanor nodded silently, too surprised by the intervention to speak. Once the men had retreated, Garrett turned back to her. "I apologize for interfering. I know you can handle yourself." "Thank you," Eleanor said softly. "Few people bother to stand up for me anymore." Garrett's eyes held hers for a moment. "People can be blind to true worth. Those cowboys don't see what I do." "And what's that?" she asked, her heart suddenly beating faster. He smiled slightly. "A woman with more courage than the whole lot of them combined." Then, with a gentle tip of his hat, he added, "Safe travels, Miss McCallister." As Eleanor drove her wagon out of town, she couldn't stop thinking about the stranger who had defended her. It had been so long since anyone besides her brother had shown her kindness that she hardly knew what to make of it. The following week brought unexpected change to the McCallister ranch. Eleanor was mending fences in the north pasture when she heard approaching hoofbeats. Shading her eyes against the sun, she was surprised to see Garrett Gray riding toward her, leading a second horse. "Miss McCallister," he called, dismounting in one fluid motion. "Mr. Gray," she replied, setting down her tools, "this is unexpected." "I hope not unwelcome," he said. "I've come with a proposition." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, wary. Many propositions had come her way since her father's death, most from men looking to buy her land for a fraction of its worth. "The Broken Spur needs good horses," Garrett explained. "Your father's bloodlines were exceptional. I've convinced my employer, Mr. Blackwell, to contract with you to breed and train quarter horses for us." Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. "But we have barely any breeding stock left, just Old Belle and 2 younger mares." Garrett gestured to the horse he'd brought. "This is Zeus, one of the finest stallions in the territory. Mr. Blackwell is willing to lend him to you for breeding purposes, in exchange for first pick of the foals at a fair price." Hope, an emotion Eleanor had almost forgotten, flickered to life. "Why would you do this?" "It's good business," Garrett said simply. And I remember what your father built here. Seems a shame to let it die. Eleanor circled the magnificent stallion, her experienced eye appreciating his strong lines and intelligent gaze. This could save our ranch, she whispered, almost to herself. That's the idea, Garrett replied quietly. Over the next month, Garrett visited the McCallister ranch regularly, sometimes bringing supplies or equipment they needed, other times just offering his expertise with the horses. Eleanor's brother Tommy took to him immediately, soaking up Garrett's knowledge of ranching and horsemanship like parched earth drinks rain. On a warm Saturday, Garrett arrived to find Eleanor struggling with a leaking roof on the barn. Without a word, he removed his coat, rolled up his sleeves, and climbed up to help. "You don't have to do this," Eleanor protested from below. "I know," he replied, hammering a new shingle into place. "But neighbors help neighbors out here. That's the code of the West, isn't it?" "Are we neighbors, Mr. Gray?" Eleanor asked, handing him more shingles. He paused, looking down at her with those clear blue eyes. "I'd like to think we're becoming friends, Miss McCallister." "Eleanor," she corrected. "My friends call me Eleanor." His smile warmed her more than the summer sun. "Eleanor it is, and I'm Garrett." By late afternoon, the roof was fixed, and Eleanor insisted Garrett stay for supper. The meal was simple rabbit stew and cornbread, but the conversation flowed easily around the table. Tommy regaled them with stories of the coyote he'd chased away from the chicken coop, while Garrett shared tales of his travels across the territories. After Tommy excused himself to finish his evening chores, Eleanor and Garrett sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. "You've done something remarkable here," Garrett said quietly. "Most men couldn't have kept this place going after what you've been through." Eleanor smiled slightly. "Most men wouldn't have had to wear dresses made from flour sacks to do it." Garrett turned to look at her directly. "You know, where I come from, a person's clothing doesn't define them." "And where is that?" she asked. "This mythical place where appearances don't matter." "Colorado," he answered with a small smile. "Grew up in a mining town where most folks had just enough to get by. My mother made all our clothes from whatever she could find. Used to say it wasn't what covered your back that mattered, but what filled your heart." Eleanor considered his words. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Garrett agreed. "She'd have admired you, Eleanor, your strength, your determination." Heat rose to Eleanor's cheeks. "It's not strength, it's just surviving." "No," Garrett said firmly. "Plenty of people survive. Few do it with the grace and dignity you've shown." Their eyes met, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Then, self-conscious, Eleanor looked away. "I should check on Tommy," she said, rising. "Of course," Garrett replied, standing as well. "I should head back to the Broken Spur." As he mounted his horse, Garrett looked back at her. "There's a social at the church next Saturday. Would you consider attending?" Eleanor's hands twisted in her worn skirt. "I don't have anything suitable to wear." Garrett's gaze was steady. "You have everything suitable already, Eleanor. Think about it." After he rode away, Eleanor stood on the porch long after darkness fell, considering his invitation and what it might mean. The next morning, Eleanor made a decision. Gathering the small amount of money she'd been saving for emergencies, she hitched up the wagon and drove to town. At the mercantile, she selected a modest length of blue cotton fabric, nothing fancy, but clean and new. Mr. Finch raised his eyebrows as he measured out the cloth. "Special occasion, Miss McCallister, the church social," she admitted. "I thought, perhaps it was time for something new." "About time," he said kindly, cutting the fabric with his shears. "And if I may say so, that blue will bring out your eyes something wonderful." For the next few days, Eleanor worked late into the night by lamplight, cutting and sewing her new dress. It was simple by the standards of women like Victoria Wilkes, but to Eleanor, it was a treasure, the first new dress she'd had in nearly 3 years. When Saturday arrived, Eleanor found herself uncharacteristically nervous. She bathed carefully, washing her long auburn hair until it shone, then twisted it up in a style she remembered her mother wearing. The new dress fit well, Emphasizing her slender waist and complimenting her fair skin and green eyes, Tommy whistled when she emerged from her room. "Wow, Ellie, you look like those ladies in the catalog pictures," Eleanor laughed, smoothing her skirt self-consciously. "Hardly, but thank you." They arrived at the church as the social was beginning. Lanterns hung from tree branches, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Tables laden with food lined one side of the churchyard, while a small group of musicians played lively tunes. Eleanor's entrance caused a stir. People who normally looked past her now stared openly, some nodding in approval, others whispering behind their hands. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that her patched dresses had never made her feel. Victoria Wilkes and her friends stood near the punch bowl, their elaborate dresses adorned with ribbons and lace. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she spotted Eleanor. "Well, well," Victoria said loudly as Eleanor approached the refreshment table. "Someone's trying to play dress up. Though I must say, plain blue cotton is hardly fashion-forward." Eleanor reached for a cup of punch, her hand trembling slightly. "Still," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I suppose it's an improvement over feed sacks. Though one new dress hardly changes who you are, a poor rancher's daughter playing at being respectable." Eleanor's cheeks burned, but before she could respond, a familiar deep voice spoke from behind her. "Miss McCallister." She turned to find Garrett standing there in a clean white shirt and dark vest, his hat in his hands. His eyes took in her appearance with undisguised appreciation. "Mr. Gray," she acknowledged, grateful for the interruption. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Victoria interjected, stepping closer to Garrett. "Mr. Gray, we were just discussing the curious transformation of our local character, rather like a Cinderella story, wouldn't you say?" Garrett's gaze never left Eleanor. "I don't see any transformation, Miss Wilkes. Miss McCallister has always been the most beautiful woman in this county. Some folks just needed proper eyes to see it." He offered his arm to Eleanor. "Would you honor me with a dance?" Eleanor hesitated, aware of all the eyes watching them. "I'm not much of a dancer." "Neither am I," he confessed with a grin. "We can be terrible together." With a small smile, Eleanor placed her hand on his arm, allowing him to lead her to the area where others were dancing. As they joined the circle dance, she felt her nervousness begin to fade. Garrett moved confidently, guiding her through the steps with a gentle hand at her waist. "Everyone's staring," she whispered. "Let them," he replied. "They're just noticing what I've seen all along." When the dance ended, Garrett kept her hand in his, leading her away from the crowd toward the church gardens where they could talk privately. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Eleanor admitted. "I spent money we can't really spare on this fabric." Garrett shook his head. "You deserve beautiful things, Eleanor, not because of how they make you look, but because of who you are." In the lantern light, his eyes were sincere and warm. Eleanor felt something unfurl inside her chest, something she'd kept carefully guarded for so long. "Why have you been so kind to me, Garrett? The truth, please." He considered her question seriously. "When I first saw you in that store, standing tall despite how those women treated you, I recognized something. Dignity. Strength. The same qualities my mother had when she raised us alone after my father died. She never had fine things, but she had more grace than anyone I've known." He paused. "Until you." Eleanor looked away, overwhelmed by his words. "I'm just trying to hold onto my father's legacy, to give Tommy a chance at a better life." "I know," Garrett said softly, "and that's what makes you remarkable." A commotion from the dance area interrupted them. Angry voices rose above the music, and they hurried back to find a group of cowboys, the same ones who had mocked Eleanor in town, arguing loudly with Tommy. "Take it back," Tommy was shouting, his young face flushed with anger. "Why should I?" sneered the lead cowboy, the smell of whiskey heavy on his breath. "Everyone knows your sister's just got one new dress to fool folks into thinking she's not trash." Eleanor pushed through the crowd, reaching for her brother. "Tommy, stop, it's not worth it." "Listen to your sister, boy," the cowboy taunted. She knows her place. Garrett stepped forward, his expression dangerously calm. I believe I told you once before to mind your manners regarding Miss McCallister. The cowboy puffed up his chest. This ain't your business, Gray. Just because you've taken a shine to the scarecrow don't mean the rest of us have to pretend she's something she ain't. A hush fell over the crowd. Garrett's hand hovered near his pistol, but Eleanor moved between them. No violence, she said firmly. Not here, not over words. Garrett's jaw tightened, but he nodded slightly. The cowboy laughed. See, even she knows she ain't worth fighting over. One new dress don't change what's underneath, just poor white trash playing dress up. Eleanor felt as if she'd been slapped. All her efforts, all her dignity reduced to nothing in the eyes of these people. She turned away, intending to leave before her emotions betrayed her. Garrett caught her hand. Eleanor, wait, please, she whispered. Let me go. Instead, Garrett turned to face the crowd that had gathered. You all think you know Eleanor McCallister because of the clothes she wears. Let me tell you what I know. His voice carried across the suddenly silent churchyard. I know a woman who buried both parents and took on a failing ranch and a young brother when she was barely more than a girl herself. I know someone who works from dawn till dusk, who mends fences and delivers foals and keeps books and still manages to put food on the table. I know a person with more courage, more dignity, and more true beauty than anyone else in this town. He turned to look directly at the drunken cowboy. So you mock her patched dresses. Those patches are badges of honor, proof of her ingenuity and determination. You laugh at her worn boots. They've walked more miles of honest work than you'll do in a lifetime. Eleanor stood frozen, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes as Garrett continued. And tonight, you think her worth has somehow changed because she's in a new dress. The truth is, she's always been the richest person here, rich in character, in strength, in everything that actually matters. He took Eleanor's hand again, his voice softening as he addressed her directly. You could be dressed in flower sacks or the finest silk from Paris, Eleanor McCallister, and it wouldn't change what I see when I look at you. You're dressed in dignity. You're dressed in courage. You're dressed, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, in my love. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eleanor's heart pounded so hard she was certain everyone must hear it. Garrett, she breathed, barely able to form words. I love you, Eleanor, he said simply. I think I have since the first moment I saw you standing tall in that store, refusing to be diminished by their cruelty. The drunken cowboy made a disgusted noise. This is ridiculous. She's nothing but, that's enough, came a stern voice from the edge of the crowd. Mr. Blackwell, owner of the Broken Spur, stepped forward. Johnson, you and your friends are no longer welcome at this social. In fact, come Monday, you can collect your wages and find employment elsewhere. The cowboys slunk away, muttering but unwilling to challenge their powerful employer. Mr. Blackwell approached Eleanor and Garrett. Miss McCallister, he said with a formal nod. I've been meaning to thank you for the fine work you're doing with our horse breeding program. Gray here tells me your stock is showing remarkable promise. Thank you, sir, Eleanor managed, still reeling from Garrett's declaration. In fact, Mr. Blackwell continued, I'd like to expand our arrangement if you're amenable. The Broken Spur could benefit from more of your family's expertise. As the crowd dispersed, returning to the music and refreshments, Eleanor found herself walking with Garrett beneath the stars, trying to process everything that had happened. Did you mean what you said? She asked finally. Every word, he replied, stopping to face her. Eleanor, I know it's sudden, is it? She interrupted softly. Sometimes I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life. Garrett's smile was like sunrise after a long night. I have plans, Eleanor, plans for a place of my own someday. Blackwell's offered me a partnership track at the Broken Spur, but ultimately I want land that belongs to me, to us if you'll have me. Are you proposing Garrett Gray? Eleanor asked, hardly daring to believe. Inelegantly, perhaps, he admitted with a slight laugh. But yes, I am. I love you, Eleanor McCallister. Your strength, your heart, your spirit. I want to build a life with you, combining your land and my savings, your horses and my cattle. Together we could make something extraordinary." Eleanor studied his face in the moonlight, searching for any hint of pity or condescension. She found only sincerity and love. "People will talk," she warned. "They'll say you could do better than the poorest rancher's daughter in the county." Garrett shook his head. "Then they're fools who measure wealth by all the wrong standards." He took her hands in his. "What do you say, Eleanor? Will you marry me?" For answer, Eleanor stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with all the emotion they'd both kept carefully contained. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I'll take that as a yes," Garrett murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "Yes," Eleanor confirmed, smiling through tears of joy. 1,000 times yes. By the following spring, the McCallister Ranch, now the Gray McCallister Ranch, was transformed. The horse breeding program with the broken spur had expanded, bringing in steady income. The fences were mended, the barn roof no longer leaked, and a fresh coat of paint brightened the farmhouse. Eleanor stood on the porch, watching as Garrett and Tommy worked with a spirited young colt in the corral. Her hand rested lightly on her growing belly, where their first child would arrive by summer's end. Victoria Wilkes rode up the lane, her expensive riding habit immaculate as always. She had married a banker from Austin and now visited Silverridge only occasionally. She dismounted gracefully, approaching the porch. "Eleanor," she greeted with surprising warmth. "The ranch looks wonderful." "Thank you," Eleanor replied genuinely. The past year had taught her that happiness left little room for old grudges. Victoria's eyes moved to Eleanor's simple but well-made dress, nothing fancy but clean and becoming. "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you before. It was unkind." "Water under the bridge," Eleanor assured her. "You know," Victoria said thoughtfully, "I've always had the finest clothes money could buy, but somehow you ended up with something far more valuable." They both looked toward the corral where Garrett had spotted Eleanor and was waving, his smile bright with love. "Yes," Eleanor agreed softly. "I certainly did." Later that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Garrett wrapped his arm around Eleanor's shoulders. "Happy?" he asked, his hand gently caressing her rounded belly. Eleanor leaned into him, content in a way she'd once thought impossible. "More than I ever dreamed. You know," Garrett said thoughtfully, "that first day in town when those cowboys were mocking your clothes. Yes, I wanted to tell them right then that you were dressed in dignity, in courage, in strength." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Dressed in all the things I love about you." Eleanor smiled, remembering his words from the church social that had changed everything. "Dressed in your love. Always," Garrett promised as the Texas stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "That's one outfit that will never wear out." And as night fell over the ranch they'd built together, Eleanor McCallister Gray knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had found the one thing more precious than any fine fabric or fashionable dress, a love as vast and enduring as the western sky above them.